listening to the TreasureCast, a production of Woodridge Community Church. The TreasureCast exists to help the church treasure Christ above all as we bring God's truth to bear on a wide range of topics in Christianity and the world around us. We pray that you are encouraged by the episodes you find here. Now for today's episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the TreasureCast. We are back in the studio tonight to put something out there that I think is going to be a pretty good episode. What do you guys think?
I'm excited. I don't know where this is going to go. This conversation is going to go because there's a lot of thoughts, but it's going to be fun for sure.
That's right. Yeah, this episode, as you can tell from the title, is really going to be a conversation about technology and then kind of specifically diving into AI. And this is relevant for us because we recently had our third annual Restoring Truth Conference. I guess it'll be when this episode's released, about a week and a half prior to this. And the topic of the conference was technology, and more specifically, artificial intelligence as something that we're interacting with regularly right now. So I'm excited to talk about this stuff tonight, guys. Thanks again for coming on the show and speaking to the various things that we're going to talk through. One quick announcement before we go is hopefully everyone is getting excited for our next Ask the Pastors episode of the TreasureCast. It's coming up here, Lord willing, in a couple of weeks. You know, there's always things in ministry that can change, but I'm just going to throw out some of the questions that we've received. We may have time for a couple more, so feel free to email your question to us if you can. But the first question is this. I love this one. Basically, we as pastors and members of our church have been very influenced by a variety of different Paedo-Baptists, like Calvin, Luther, Sproul, Ryle, etc. What has kept you Baptists? So we're going to talk about that in the future at that next episode.
The Bible.
Next question.
Do we need that question? Question answered. Check the box. Bible. Done. I love it. Luke, you're on for that episode, just so you know. And then the second one is in the episode on death and dying. Pastor Drew mentioned that churches in the past have had graveyards, and so why don't we have one at Woodridge? So we'll talk through that a little bit. The third one is besides the Bible, what's our most kind of influential book, or what would you recommend as a number one resource to other Christians besides the Bible? And then the last one is, in what ways is the commandment to remember the Sabbath applicable to Christians? So 4 real good questions for our next episode of Ask the Pastors. If you are interested in submitting more episodes or more questions for that episode, we'll see what we can fit in, but please email us at treasurecast@woodridge.cc, treasurecast@woodridge.cc, and we'll try to fit some more questions in. All right. Now, with that said, technology and AI. You know, I think, Matt, were you saying you had a Bible verse that specifically spoke to those two topics, technology and AI, off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's in the book of 4th John.
4th John. It's the later revelation, of John, But there really isn't anything, guys, is there, that speaks to these two topics, like, specifically?
Right.
Sure.
At the conference, Chuck did the first plenary session and gave a theology of tools, technology, and then got into tools and walked through Genesis passages, especially the first, 6 chapters, and pointed out, different passages that speak about tools. And so even though there's not an explicit passage that talks about technology in the way that we might want it to talk about technology, scriptures to talk about technology, you can apply those passages where tools are being used because, as he pointed out, tools are technology.
That's right.
That help us to fulfill the mandate that God has given to us in Genesis 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we saw that a lot during the conference. Is just, obviously the Bible doesn't talk specifically about the things that we're going to talk about today, but it does give wisdom, right? And as we think about artificial intelligence, as we think about technology, advanced technology, Scripture still gives us principles that we can apply to the wise use or the unwise use of these things. And so I think, even as I was talking with a lot of, all of us, either did a plenary session or a break-off session, I think that's the theme that kind of prevailed through a lot of the talks that we gave, is just what are the principles, what are the truths in Scripture that help us to navigate through some of these topics that Scripture does not specifically mention.
Yeah, I think, were you going to say something?
No.
I think too, to that point, like when we think about wisdom, and Luke, I know you mentioned in your plenary session, self-control. And I think that's a huge one for us as well when we interact with technology, having restraint on what we should or shouldn't be doing. And I think those two principles are just, huge when we're talking about these topics. And I know when I spoke, and just for those who are listening to, we're not going to regurgitate every single detail of our presentations. Obviously, all of that content will be available if it isn't already by the time this episode is released on our website, woodridge.cc/media. You can go to the media section of our website. We'll have a Restoring Truth 2026 section in there to have all the plenary sessions kind of laid out there, and then all the breakout sessions as well. So we're not going to get into every single detail that we've already taught on. This is going to be more, we can comment on each other's talks, we can comment on some of these questions that we've prepared, and then also other things that maybe we weren't able to fit into the conference, or things that we've even talked about and thought about as pastors as well. But one thing that sticks out to me about, Matt, what you said, specifically just that wisdom, Proverbs 1:1-7, ultimately, let the wise hear and increase in learning. Like, that's what we want to do. We want to increase our knowledge on these topics, because my dad always say, knowledge defeats fear. Like, the more you know about something, the better equipped you are to handle it. But the more you know about something with the right goal in mind of how to use that thing, and ultimately it's the fear of the Lord in raising our families and seeking to not be mastered by technology and AI, the better it's going to be. And then one thing that stuck out to me too is to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Like, that is why we need to learn more about these things. I'm 41 now, and I'm not getting any younger, guys. And maybe you guys are. I'm not. But technology is still something that I've always been really interested in. But I will admit, like, I am not as I shouldn't say happy about it. I'm not as into it as I used to be. And I think that's a growth in me. My wife would say that's a growth. But it's also because the younger kids are mastering this stuff a lot more than we are. And we have to be, as parents, as future grandparents, we have to still not be unaware of what is happening around us in our culture, specifically with technology and artificial intelligence.
Right.
Yeah, I would say, over the last year, things have definitely ramped up with the awareness in amongst just the general population. Obviously, AI, they've been working on artificial intelligence for, back into the 1900s, 20, 30 years ago. But it's very prevalent in the last year, and it's starting to pop up, and it's becoming kind of mainstream. So one of the things that one of the approaches that I've been taking is I want to use it. I want to learn, and I want to think deeply about how I'm using it, right? Because like we talked about it in the conference, it is a tool, right? And I think there's it's okay to seek to use it as a tool, but then to constantly be evaluating what that tool is affecting in me, or whether that tool is being used in a way that is unwise. And I think one of the reasons this is such a helpful topic is because everybody's kind of all over the place on you're not as excited as some people are. There's people who are a lot more concerned about these things, and there's a spectrum even among all of us. If you're just listening, you didn't see the look.
This is the nonverbals.
Yeah. If you're only listening and not watching, but we differ. And that's okay. And I actually think that there's some health there, because I'm excited about some of these things, and I want to be wise, and I want to think deeply. Yeah. But I also need to hear from others who are saying, hey, let's maybe start cautious and not just jump in full force with these things. And so I think that's why this is such an important topic to come back to, and we're going to have to come back to it again and again. Things are changing so quickly.
It's going to change. Even I know the books that we read, even preparing for the conference, were dated, being published just a couple months or even 6 months before we read them. Yeah, they were already outdated based on the information and the levels and versions of GPT that were out there when the book was written. It wasn't even a thing when we went through it. It was so far advanced. One thing that I think, to start us off, or continue us, I should say, into some of our questions, Luke, you brought this up already from Pastor Chuck, that theology of technology. I think just highlighting those 4 things that he set out for us to kind of spring us into maybe talking about a more advanced tech like AI. He had 4 things that kind of were theology of technology. The first one was, what is for tools, right? Technology as a tool. What is the intended purpose for the tool was the first one. So when you think about why a tool is created, what is its purpose, okay? And he talked about the broader and the more diverse a tool is, or its uses, the more it can be used for not just good things, right? Because it can be used for maybe some things that aren't that good. So we have to think about that. What is the intended purpose for these tools that we're interacting with? Is it nefarious? Is it good? It's not just neutral, right? We have to think that through. The second thing was the use of the tool. And so, is it being used for the same thing that it once was? I thought immediately when he was talking, I've got thoughts on cell phones. Maybe I'll share some of them. But when a cell phone first came out, it had a very specific use, right? It was to call people. That's why it's called a cell phone, cellular phone. And that is barely what we do on our phones nowadays. Yeah. If you look at your phone and look at your app history and usage, I guarantee the phone app that you have on your phone is 2% probably of how you actually use your phone, or something significantly lower, right?
And there's people who are I know people who they don't want to talk on the phone. Somebody will call them, that's right, and they will not answer,
ignore it,
and they'll text you. They'll text you or something like that. So people. I mean, the original purpose was to make a call, and now people are afraid to do. Yeah. They'd rather text or message or
I like going opposite. If your text is longer than 2 sentences to me, it's why didn't you just call me?
Yeah.
Just call me now.
You can get this done with a phone call, right? Quicker.
So that use of the tool can drift over time. The third thing was the consequences of our tool, of our tools, and so essentially, some things once they've been created, they were hailed as these good things, but there may be some unintended consequences that we have to live with because of that tool, and we're seeing that I think in a lot of the technology today that's connected to the internet, and then also the complexity. So those 4 things. So theology of the tool, so intended purpose for it, use of the tool, consequences of our tool, and complexity of the tool. Any other thoughts on some of that?
And that's what makes advanced technology and AI so unique in that you don't normally hear from your tools. You think of other tools that were mentioned at the conference, like a shovel. Even animals are tools that God has given to us to use to get work done. But now we have a tool that can talk to us and steer us a certain direction, good or bad. And we're talking about what it is, and I don't know if you want to get into that yet.
Go ahead.
But you had some thoughts about a definition.
Yeah, it was just we talked about this in the conference, but the elders read through a book, Made in Our Image, and we've already talked about it on the episode. But in that, and then obviously I've tried to study a little bit and do my own, seeking to understand what this is and how it works. And essentially, what artificial intelligence is it's a predictor of patterns. It's a predictor of of words, and one of the simple ways that I think for the majority of us can seek to understand this is, when you're texting on your phone, right above all the the keyboard, oftentimes you'll see it's predicting what your next word is going to be, right? And a lot of times it gets it right, and that's essentially at a very bare, the most basic level, that is essentially what artificial intelligence is we continue to feed information, more and more information, so that the predictions and the patterns that this AI is able to discern becomes more consistent, easier to spit out something that makes sense and that is actually congruent with what you ask it to do, right? And so that's a very basic. That's probably too simplistic, but I think that's a good analogy. Thinking about that text, So then, if I write into one of these large language models like ChatGPT, hey, can you create me a recipe for pumpkin pie? Then ChatGPT, with all of the information that has been fed, starts the ball rolling of putting word after word after word based off of the information that it's gathered around recipes for pumpkin pie, and then it spits out what in most cases is a recipe, and it makes sense to the person reading. But that's at the heart of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I gave like a really long, comprehensive. I tried to get as technical as possible, and ran into words that I had never said before, heard anybody else say, and I tried to say them, and I probably said a few of them incorrectly. But the part of that definition is that it might be helpful to have in mind. Artificial intelligence refers to technology that enables computers to simulate aspects of human intelligence.
That's right.
AI imitates human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision making, creativity, and even a degree of autonomy. And there's so many different veins and types of AI, but this idea of mimicking or simulating the human brain and how we think, and it's man-made. It's not a living being. Doesn't have a soul. It's an it. It's not an Alexa girl. It's not. It's not human, but it's copying the way that we think and taking all of, like you talked about, large language models, and it's taking all of this data and this information that we have created as humans, and now it's bringing it together. And so if you want a pumpkin pie recipe, or you want a warthog pie recipe, or whatever you might want, I don't know if that's a thing.
I'm going to try that one.
I think that's something
that in
killed the warthog on a lone one time. So maybe some people would warthog pumpkin pie recipe.
It's probably a thing, but it is now. You can look it up and create a recipe on ChatGPT,
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so unique is that it mimics the human elements, that you can conversate with an Alexa or what's the other one? Is it Gemini or
Gemini's one, Copilot. You've probably heard of.
And so there's
yeah.
I was going to say Gronk.
And so if it's interacting with you and speaking with you, it's mimicking relationships, and that's something that we have to be mindful of in our searches. As if it shows up in your computer, maybe that's one thing, but in the ways in which we interact with it, and there's ways that we're talking with it and to it, and it's talking back, it's creating something that is a synthetic relationship.
Absolutely.
That I think we just need to be cautious of where we go down.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Before I continue though, warthog pie starts with 2 pounds of warthog shoulder.
All right.
Yeah.
4 strips of bacon.
Substitute pork shoulder, probably, if you don't have warthog shoulder.
A large
That's not warthog
onion,
pie
some,
then. If you
some
substitute the warthog.
some garlic cloves, a couple carrots and mushrooms. We might have to make this and see what it's like. But there's a warthog pie out there.
That can be the TreasureCast meal. They have a big warthog pie right in the middle.
We got lasagna for the Calvinism episodes. Now this is, for the AI episode, we try an AI pie.
I'm sick half the episode.
Anyways, okay. Back to the topic at hand. I agree with you. And one of the things as I was preparing my talk that kept coming back to my mind is, when we are being shaped, right? Whether we like it or not. And I think Pastor Chuck gave such a wonderful illustration in his first plenary session about thinking about something as positive as air conditioning, right? And I don't think I would have ever thought of that tool as having a shaping effect on us, and talking about how that the invention of the air conditioner caused people to be out on their porches less, which removed the need for a front porch. And so then the backyard deck became a thing. And so now having air conditioners in vehicles now allows neighbors who live right next to each other to go about their lives with almost no interaction with one another. Right. So it's shaping how it's it's shaping us and how we interact with the world. And one of the things that I think it's going to become for many is an idol, It's going to become something that becomes like that companion in our life, like you were talking about, Derek. And the verse that kept coming to mind for me as I was preparing my session is Psalm 115, verses 4-8, where it says, "Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands." Right. So this is a tool. It's a work. It's something created by humans.
Eyes we cannot see.
They have mouths.
Preach on the sermon.
I did. That's right.
Yeah, on this text.
So am I
No. I just remember it.
Ago for our
Yeah.
Did, yeah.
that was a great
They have mouths but do not speak, eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, noses but do not smell. They have hands but do not feel, feet but do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. And I think that one of the warnings. I'm optimistic in a lot of ways. We're all on a spectrum of caution versus optimism with artificial intelligence. There's a lot of things that I'm cautious about too. Yeah. So I don't want people to think that I'm just all in and not thinking wisely about these things. But I'm optimistic. But one of the things that I think artificial intelligence is going to blur the lines of what we read in this passage, because in the past you had something that had the shape of a mouth but couldn't speak. It's something that had the shape of ears but couldn't hear, and now we have something that simulates. It's not true speech, it's not true hearing, right? But it's simulating that, and then we throw that into a robot, which is already happening. And making it as human-like as possible, as easy to find companionship as possible. And now we have hands that sort of do have sensors and can feel, and feet that do walk. And so, that's one thing that I was thinking about in response to what you were saying, Derek, is that we do need to think deeply about a lot of these things, because it's going to shape us. It's going to produce idolatry in our culture. It's going to produce a lot of things that as Christians we need to be thinking about now, so that we don't get so attached. I've had to catch myself at times, just like somebody said earlier, it's an it, but you hear this male voice or this female voice speaking to you, and it's easy to say he or she. And so I try to be very intentional, referring to it as an it instead of a he or a she. Yeah. And so there,
I think as you were talking, obviously the warning applies to all of us as Christians who, obviously we have to fight idolatry in a lot of areas in our lives. And this is another area where we have to make sure we're fighting it. But I also think, my talk was on how to basically, how do you introduce technology in the family, with kids in various ages. And speaking specifically of AI, I do think that we're experiencing it as adults. It wasn't part of our childhood. It was science fiction. And so there's a level of disconnectedness, even though we have the tools in front of us, like we're both sitting here with AI chips in these computers, like, you know what I mean? Like it's in our stuff now.
Yeah.
But like the kids born today, or even just a few years old, can't remember much, are literally not going to know a world without it.
Yeah.
And so when you have information like AI gives you at your fingertips, there can be a temptation to not learn anymore, to just get the answer, especially in our public school system. Like that's kind of what they're driving for, is just getting the answers right, passing the tests, doing the things. Don't really care if people learn the information or know it, in large part. I know there's some exceptions to that generalization. But I worry, and I think we need to think deeply about how are we letting kids that are in our families, in our churches, that we're interacting with, relate to this technology. Obviously we can't hide it from them forever, so we have to teach them before they leave our homes, how to interact with it. But I think that there's so much cheating that can happen nowadays, just without AI. just with smartphones in your pockets, little mini computers in your pockets, and looking up a test score or having an earbud underneath your hair or something, you can easily get someone telling you answers. But now you've got this like near, it's not omniscient, right? But we know it's got a ton of information from humanity, written works from our culture. It's got almost endless answers for things. And so that's a temptation for people who want to just sit there and play video games and then not study. Or they want to go run around and play and they don't want to do their work and prepare for the hard task that's before them tomorrow in that test or that quiz.
Yeah. When I think it was Chuck who mentioned it, that, the goal is not efficiency. Right, not everything is about efficiency, and so AI, you might be able to get an answer quickly enough, but is that going to be better for you? Are you imaging Christ better to the world when you're outsourcing that which God has given you, the brain power, the intelligence, the wisdom to figure out? Are you outsourcing that? Are you trying to find that quick answer? Just don't know how at times maybe, right? We all do it. You looked up pie recipes. I mean, we do it.
You need a quick warthog pie recipe.
But
Right.
But we need to have wisdom as to when to do that, especially for children and learning. Traditional learning, not only is it probably better for our children, but I think it images Christ better.
Right.
And you think about so many different cultural things that are going on in our day. So the movement, I don't identify as male or female. Now you've got these machines that are not male or female, and they are but they're people who are doing that. Efficiency, that like we're becoming more and more like machines. Like it's just about getting the task done, not thinking, not relationships, not fellowship, not community, but just get the work done, be an individual, identify however you want. There's a lot of connections, things to think through here, and we might see them as disconnected, but it is related to our culture and the world and what's going on apart from Christ. If you don't have a biblical worldview, you're going to be susceptible. Yeah. If you're not thinking through these things with doctrine in mind, you're going to go down some crazy places, and it's going to destroy your life. And so that's what we're wanting to do as pastors. This is not just some hobby. When we first broach this topic for the conference, I was just thinking like, oh, is this a big? No, this is a really big deal. This is a huge deal, and we need to press into this because if we don't, the church isn't going to understand and have a biblical view on technology, AI, and so. This is a pressing matter, and there's so many pressing matters. But you think about, as you were talking about, Drew, with our children and how this is shaping them and us pastorally, and as Christians, we have to make sure that we're honoring the Lord, or we're thinking about these things in such a way that aligns with His Word.
Amen. Yep.
And you think of what AI is giving us today, and all of the benefits that people are talking about, and making certain things easier in our culture. And, we talked about this, I think, at the conference, but it's worth mentioning again, Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel. I think of like they were building this tower, because they said, come, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's like, we don't want to be all about what God wants for us anymore. We want to make a name for ourselves. And, you can see some of those parallels coming into, advanced technology, not just AI and other things too, that I think is a way for us to rebel against God. I'm not saying all use of AI is rebellion. There's definitely times where I've used it, and I still do, and whatever else, but I just think that pursuit of being like God is something that Satan, Lucifer, fell into. He wanted to be God, and that's what caused him to fall. That pride, that thinking we're more than we are. I just think that AI can be that for humanity, especially for people who aren't rooted in the scriptures.
Yeah.
Like, this is their God. This is their hope, is that their consciousness will live in a computer someday so they can experience eternal life through, transhumanism.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Yeah. And transhumanism related to all of these things. We're not human anymore. We're not identifying with the sexes that God has created us. We're using machines to think for us instead of, and so that's kind of the dark end of where these things can go. And you brought in like another salvation. Like, we don't need God. We'll build a tower. We'll build a machine. We'll build a computer. Yeah. And that will save us. And all of that is anti-Christ, not the Antichrist necessarily. Maybe some.
Derek.
Maybe, I'm not saying Derek thinks the AI is the Antichrist, but it is Antichrist, and that people are looking to machines, looking to advanced technology to save them, to rescue them from really the sin that they have committed and the sin around them, and the answer is Christ. So all of these are tied to like essential Christian doctrines. Yeah. The doctrine of God, the doctrine of man, soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. So all of these things you can make connections to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things in the book, Made in Our Image, that Woodridge elders read over the past several months, that was really helpful for me to think through, is that like the title of the book, AI is not made in the image of God; it's made in the image of man, and it's being fed the information that man has produced, which there's a lot of sinful, wicked information that is being fed into it, and it's being shaped to have the morality of man, right? And so I think another area that we need to be cautious, and I talked about this in my break-off session, is one of the ways in which we use wisdom when we're using it as a tool is how much of the morality that God calls us to are we handing over to allow artificial intelligence to make moral decisions on our behalf. He talks about in the book, use it as a tool to analyze data, consolidate large amounts of information into a graph that's a lot more manageable and easy to understand. There's no ethics involved there. And in that way, the tool can be used, I think, in a very good, helpful way. But then he says in the book, what about, in the future, having artificial intelligence run hospitals and making these decisions on who lives and who dies and how to treat people. There's a lot of morality, and I've read articles and heard stories of artificial intelligence encouraging people to do wicked things.
That's right. Before,
right? Yeah. And they kind of go back to the drawing board and they say, that wasn't a good answer. You shouldn't have responded. And you can kind of train and shape the responses by giving, by feeding it more information that says, hey, you never tell somebody to kill themselves. Right.
Right.
But at the end of the day, there's always going to be this moral element that we have to navigate through and work through. And artificial intelligence, as it's outputting things for us, is having to decide some of that in giving the response that it does, or performing the task that it does.
And I think that's a good thing to talk about now too, is obviously it can be good and it can be bad. And so let's maybe talk about some of the good uses of artificial intelligence right now, or maybe things that have been helpful as you've interacted with it, or even as you've studied it. In what ways can artificial intelligence, AI, Gemini, Copilot, some of these large language models, Grok, how can they be helpful for us as believers, as pastors for us, but then also just as people? What do you guys think are some helpful ways? You don't have to say this is how I use it, but how, what are some things that you guys can think of that are helpful for it? I know I use it for proofreading sometimes, as far as comma, punctuation. I have to tell it to stop rewriting my stuff. It's oh, here's a revised version of your document. No, I didn't want you to rewrite it. I wanted you to just proof it for me. Tell me where I'm missing the comma. Mm-hmm. My wife and daughter have volunteered to do that for me now, and so that's great. But I know I've used it for that before, but I think it can be helpful. It's really powerful for that. If you're trying to research, certain things, I think that it can give you you a lot of sources that you can look into. I'm definitely one where it's really easy just to take it at its word, and just be like, okay, I'm just going to believe your stats and sources. I still think we need to go to the website and find and read the information, print off the article, maybe highlight what you would, because that's how you're learning, is through working, and researching. But that's how I've used it for that before. What about you guys? What are some good uses that maybe AI has that we can think, about?
Here, you got something there?
No, I was going to say, you taught a lot on that class, but yeah, go.
I got some really good news for all you people out there who love a good deal. Okay. One of the things that the computer that I have in front of me, I was looking to get, I for years I had an iPad with a
you finally upgraded to
and I finally upgraded to a laptop.
Windows.
And I wanted a good quality laptop at a good price. And so I decided this was the laptop that I wanted to get. It's not super top of the line, but it's not bottom of the barrel. And I went into ChatGPT and I said, can you find me the best deal on this? And it found it. I was looking on Best Buy. I was looking in blah, blah, blah. And it found a special deal on Walmart. So I got it on Walmart's website for $150 cheaper than I would have had to pay.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's things like that. I've done that. My wife and I just had our second kid a couple months ago, and we're talking about whether we want to sell her vehicle, get a minivan. And so I've used that search within this amount of within this radius, and give me recommendations on the top 5 used minivans. This we're looking at Toyota Siennas, Honda Odyssey, so. Keep it within that and keep it, within this year, or whatever, under this amount of miles, and it pops out and it gives you, that's one way.
I'll piggyback on you. And so we've done it. Ashley and I went on a little 2-day away, one night, little getaway just after the new year. And I was like, I want a cabin with like a wood stove or a fireplace within a 3-mile radius of Milwaukee, within this price point, for not a 2-night stay, just a 1-night stay, because a lot of the Airbnbs and VRBOs, you have to be like 2 nights. And it spit out like 5 things. And like literally like the top, like, I think we ended up choosing like the second option, and all of them were like really good, but like the 3 of them or the other 4 were like, you had to do a 2-night minimum, and we only could just do 1 night away. And so to your point, like, it's a really good like research show. I could have just gone on like every single website and spent hours away from my family researching this stuff for something that I really didn't need to invest that much time in. But we had a great time on that little trip, and that was a use of it. Another use I'm using it for. We're working on a songbook at Woodridge, and like sometimes the formatting for my program gets a little putsy, and sometimes the margins get off, and I'll throw in the PDF into it, and it'll tell me, oh, you need to adjust this margin over a little bit, or this word is hyphenated wrong, you need to do it this, so there's some things that, I've looked at it, other people have looked at it, and then it's another checking point for like, hey, is this product ready for the final PDF version of our songbook? Mm-hmm. And so those are a couple of uses I have.
I think those are really good examples, because it's like tangible thing. Like you can compare the 2 prices of the computer and say, clearly this is better. And be thankful that this machine helped you find that. And so it's like a research assistant.
Yeah.
And it's clearly a better price. And it's not this, a doctrine. You're drawing your theology just from what you type in here. Mm-hmm. Those are really good uses. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one I've thought of is putting different financial scenarios in, budget planning, tax law, all of those things that it rather than maybe bother a financial planner right away or your accountant. I mean, some of these things can just be helpful as educating you a little bit on some of that. So I think there are definitely some good uses for AI. I think, to your point, when it kind of stretches outside of facts or things that we know can be concrete pointed to as this is true or not. That's where I think when it becomes ambiguous as to maybe getting you to think a different way about something. That's think, where it grays a little bit.
Yeah.
When it's suggesting, hey, you ought to do this, you should do this. That's where I tend to pause and
and
think about
that goes back to kind of the morality and the ethical, like allowing, because what could happen is then you start to, and I know this is happening with people, you start to just allow the artificial intelligence to make your decisions for you and everything, and to become your God that you just serve, by basically feeding it whatever you're thinking, and whatever it tells you is the right thing to, and the right way to go. But the other thing, another way that I used it, I get calls. My mortgage lender loves now's the time to refinance, and I get that like every 3 months, And so he sends me like, here's the math, and I don't understand half of this stuff. But he's like, if you don't refinance now, it's basically like throwing $1,000 away because of this. This is, and so I've taken that proposal that he gives me and I throw it in. I was like, can you help me understand some of the math here of why he's saying this? And I found that it's not. I'm not doing that devoid of thinking and just allowing artificial intelligence to tell me now's the time to refinance, or no, don't refinance. But I'm saying I don't understand how all this stuff works. But if you think about, okay, yes, you're saving some money in monthly payments in the short run, but you're extending your mortgage out back to 30 years, and you're getting this interest rate saving, but by extending it out and having to pay that interest over however many extra years you've added onto your mortgage, then this is really, when you look at the math, this isn't like adding up financially, or it is. And so I've used it to do that. But to your point, Derek, and some of the points that we've been making, like I don't ever just spit it in, throw information in, and then whatever it says, it's like, oh, it says to refinance, I'm going to refinance, or it says don't refinance, I'm not going to refinance. I'm seeking to use it to help break something down that's complicated and I have no knowledge or understanding of, and very quickly help me now in the future when he inevitably sends me my new, it's time to refinance. I can say, nope, I think based on what you just sent me and what I now know, I don't think it's time, or now it makes sense.
Yeah, you've helped to educate yourself so that you can make those decisions, right?
Yeah. And I think these are all kind of the lower, people might say, well, that's great, but like there's a lot of potential dangers, that can be used, like Gen AI, which again is some really fun things for a lot of us to like, oh, we can create this, or we can, I mentioned in my talk about the video of Jonathan baptism we mentioned in the beginning, but Jonathan Edwards and Charles Spurgeon having this rap battle.
How many of you guys went back and watched that rap battle?
Was that you hadn't seen it before?
No, I saw it.
Okay.
I saw it, but I had to watch it again after.
I did not, but I remember it vividly.
It was so good.
Spurgeon won.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's funny, that's neat, but it's like, man, but the potential there for danger. So what have you come across some of like the high potentials for like this can really be a great tool for humanity? And I have one in an article I read by C.R. Wiley, who's an author, theologian, pastor, and he's written and talked a lot about, he's coming out with a book soon on AI stuff. And he's not all optimistic. He's not all, these are great. He's like, hey, these are problems. These are concerns that, and we recognize God's sovereignty. No one's greater, more powerful than God. God is sovereign over all these things, and yet we are responsible, and we need to make wise decisions. And these things can have great tragic effects on humanity. Like you think of lots of different things in world history. So all that to say, C.R. Wiley mentions how scientists have been studying how like proteins fold. I don't know. I mean, this is beyond my, I definitely wasn't a science or a biology expert, but he talks about how scientists have been studying this for years, and they estimate that it would take them decades to figure this out. And AI did that in like hours. And so they ran these tests, and that they've been working on for a long time and would be working on for decades more, and bam, there's the result. And they know how many times proteins can fold or something, that type of thing.
Yeah, like some of the scientific things.
Yeah.
A lot of time where it's like we can't run that many scenarios just ourselves. Like, so let the computer do it, and it can do it way faster and better with cleaner results than we can.
So do you know what the benefit of folding a protein is?
I'm sure one of our science listeners can inform us. But
do you know
you can fit more grams of protein in your diet?
If I recall, there was something to do with with medicine and with health issues. Some major. It was a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
And then they tested it, and sure enough, but then it sped that whole process up, figured out this issue that they've been struggling with, and But there's other stuff like that. I've come across some of that.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, and I don't know, unless you had something else, I think that this might be a good place to kind of connect with that, is thinking about that and always remembering, we're praising God for these things, right? We're not praising AI, right? It isn't, it's, as we say, it doesn't have a soul. It's void of the Holy Spirit. So we're praising God for these things. And so thinking about what are those ways in which we can, have dominion over this tool, where we are assessing it and going, okay, it helped me. It helped, my family. It helped the Lord's people. Praise God. And not the other way around, where AI is mastering us.
That's right.
And so I think that maybe that's a place to think about for us. How do we exercise our dominion over it, and not let the opposite happen?
Yeah. I think that in order to do that, we have to understand maybe some of the downsides of how we can abuse it. We talked a little bit about this, and but I do think if we've got all these pros and things for how we can interact with it, and some little things, but then also some of the big things that may benefit our society. I think of maybe stoplights. If they're AI, maybe they'll be able to you'll not be able to sit at a red light for 3 minutes.
20 minutes when there's no
cars. You literally could just, if you weren't a Christian, you would just run the red light because there's no one coming, but you're obeying the law. But the flip side of that, if you're thinking about negatives of AI, there's you guys have all probably heard of the data centers that are coming into Wisconsin or are already here. One's taking over the old Foxconn plot down in Pleasant Prairie, and the other one I think is going in Whitefish Bay. I think it was just approved. So from a technological perspective, not even an infrastructure perspective, we can develop dependence, and it can do our work for us, and we can become lazy. And the Wall-E thing that you mentioned, we're all just going to turn to big fat people, and AI is going to do all the work. No, we've been created to work. That's wrong. We can't use it for our jobs in the sense of it's taking away our creative abilities, our writing abilities, our actually doing the work abilities, and we can elaborate on that more. But the other side of it is the infrastructure. I was looking into this a little bit over the last couple of days, and the costs for infrastructure are really expensive for these data centers. They have, I think it's exzillions or I don't know, exbytes. I don't know what it is, but it's like billions and billions of terabytes of data that they store. All of our information from your searches and your history and all this stuff, and it's all these millions and millions of processing chips that are basically making up these AI brain data centers that are in Wisconsin, or they're being built in Wisconsin. One of these plants takes the equivalent of what a city with 50,000 people in it uses a day in water.
I think the city of New Berlin is
it's probably a little less, like 40 something, right? I think, but yeah. So say New Berlin is 50,000 people. The amount of water that New Berlin uses in a day is how much one of these data centers uses in a day. So it's the same water as 50,000 population city. So that's one thing to think through. Is wow, that's why they have to be by the lake, because we've got these copious amounts of water in Wisconsin on Lake Michigan. And so, there's those types of things that we have to think through. Every time we're pressing the search button or clicking over to AI search instead of regular internet search, we are fueling the demand for some of this stuff. So that's water. energy, and this is highly debated. President Trump, I think, has tried to pass legislation saying these data center companies need to be paying for their own energy because they're private entities. It should not fall on the citizens. But over the last 2 years in Wisconsin, We Energies has tried to jack up our rates 15 to 20% to help cover the costs of these AI data centers. It didn't pass. It was like 7%, and then it was 9% this last year. But 75% of the materials used to build these data centers are funded by the people. 25% are funded by the people. 75% they're eating the cost, the companies are, but 25% are being added to the people's tax bill. And so I do think there are implications that we have to be aware of the convenience that you're getting on your computer or on your phone does have some potential real life consequences with your wallet and potentially natural resources. Okay, Wisconsin, we've got lots of water. They supposedly have closed loop systems where they're not getting, this water's not getting contaminated with radiation or all these bad things, supposedly. Who knows if it's true or not. But what about other states that are already kind of in water crises? Like, are they, how are they going to solve these issues if they're trying to compete with these other states that have these data centers? And so I think that's just a side of AI that we need to be cognizant of is out there. It's not just like enhancements to what we currently have and it just runs better and it's faster. No, it's actually coming at a cost. Like, I think I saw it's like 6 or 8 football fields worth of like these storage drives is what's in one of these things. That's a ton of space that's now consuming a lot of electricity and a lot of water.
Yeah, because in order for artificial intelligence to get better, there has to be more and more data.
That's right.
That helps it predict the pattern, predict the words and predict the patterns and stuff like that.
So that's a negative, I think. When we think of our world and our, wanting to be good stewards of the earth, and obviously, we have to be mindful of what we're using and is it worth it, is it not? And ultimately, I think, there may be some pushback at some point by people who are like, I barely use this tool and my taxes have gone up, my energy has gone up, the water is trickling out of my faucet. In some of these cities where the centers have been built, not in Wisconsin, this is in other places, people have noticed a decrease in the amount of water that they can get in their house. The water pressure has significantly dropped because of the demand. So that's one. Another thing that I'll say, and then I'll stop and you guys can comment on maybe some negatives, is I think just being mindful of what you're sharing with it. And so I think, when you were talking about some of these things that we're sharing with it, it's just, general things. It's document. It's storing everything that we're sharing with it. So like if you're saying, here's my W-2, help me do my taxes, like, don't do that. Now Microsoft, has your W-2, your social security number, your wife's social security number, all your earning history, all these things in one of their, and once you've put it into Copilot, you literally cannot get it back because they're using it for training purposes. Like, it's going to take you so much time. It's not even worth your effort to try to say, hey, I accidentally uploaded this document. I shouldn't have. Give me my information back. Once it's up there, it is gone, and they have it now, and they will not easily get rid of it if get rid of it at all. And so I do think just being mindful of what we are putting into it. And I would argue too, like, that goes for cell phones, that goes for computers. I don't know if maybe I'll go on this little tangent. It's crazy what you have agreed to in a lot of these user agreements that you sign without even reading, and what they're doing with your information. AI is just the newest version of this. But if you were just to Google search your name, and I've had a couple people do this that I've talked to recently, because, when I get into something, I get excited about it and I kind of share it with people, and then, it's just kind of how my personality is. But you will be surprised at what comes up when you look. Every single phone number you've ever owned, every single address you've ever lived, all of your family's information, all of these things, it's just kind of like, how do they have all that information? Well, guess what? When you signed up for maybe Facebook or whatever it was 20 years ago, and they keep saying, oh, we've updated our terms of agreement, click here to read it, and you never read treat it, over time, you have basically given them permission to sell your information to data brokerage companies that then sell it to marketing firms, and that's why you get targeted ads and all these other things. And so I do think that like we just need to be responsible, and maybe there'll be a swing of the pendulum back towards responsibility with our information and our personal data. Not that we have to all unplug and go off the grid and have these aliases for everything, and so the government they're going to know things about us because it's the government. But you can stop random Joe Schmo who's trying to steal grandma's money from potentially having access to literally all of her information through taking some precautions, right? So I think that's a downside potentially of AI, but then that kind of goes into more technology as well.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Other things?
I think
comments on that.
Brent got into this in the third session, but the danger that AI is to community, to being embodied souls, like living as embodied souls. We are. That can't be taken away from us. The transhumanists will not win. It's not going to happen where we become machines, but they're trying. And AI, that part that we've talked about already, where you're talking to it becomes your pastor. That's a danger. Or your parent or your community. And we already have that in different avenues with video games where people they're living in this fake world and not the real world. And now AI will interact with you, and it's actually not a human. So it's another level of that. Instead of you interacting with a human in this fake world, now you're interacting with a fake person, and they're giving you direction. And so I think that's probably for most people one of the biggest dangers is that it becomes more than just a tool, but a person that you rely on, you're friends with. I had planned to maybe go into this, and I think I might have even gone into this last year, but you know how people will treat their pets almost like they're humans or like they're humans. I'm a dad dog.
Dog dad.
Dad dog. Yeah, dog dad. That's dog dad. Well, I'm a AI dad. I've got this made up. I mean, that's where it's going.
Yeah,
we used to. People might even laugh at hearing that, but you think of what's happened with gender, what's happened with so many of these things. There's going to be somebody who you have your own avatar that you've created, and it's your child, and you adopt it, whatever, that weird stuff. So that's, I think, for most people, the biggest danger is it replaces real human relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and admittingly, right, coming into when we first started studying this and working through this, obviously I was probably, if there was a spectrum, and maybe I'm not too far from it still, but I'm definitely on the cautious side. I'm definitely on that side. However, in studying, the answer is not to just, not engage with it and don't be educated about it and just leave it be. And so I feel like from a lot of our conversations and through study and even the conference, it's pretty, I guess, evident that it's not going anywhere. And so we want to, if we're going to use it as a tool, we want to use it in ways that glorify the Lord. And so that's one thing. The second thing that I'll say, I think the big, at least what I think about often is what Luke had mentioned, as well as it replacing who God created us to be, and the ways in which He's created us to be as a creator, created us to be creative and to make things that are beautiful. And if we outsource that, I think it does something to who we are as image bearers, that I have a caution for myself, my family, our people, to make sure that it doesn't replace all the good and beautiful things and that God is to us and that we're meant to image. And I think we need to be thinking about that and cautious about that.
Yeah, that was along the same lines of what I was going to say. Is one of the biggest dangers is that, as this technology, because it's going to get more advanced, it's going to be able to do more, and as it does that, I think the danger is that we begin to offload more and more of what God has given us our responsibility to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I use the example of, I, as a father and a husband, have a responsibility to lead my family. Mm-hmm. Nothing and no one no tool, no other person can fulfill the responsibility that God has given to me with my family, right? And I think as the tool of artificial intelligence becomes more and more powerful, we're going to be tempted and able to more and more and more offload some of those responsibilities. I think that's very dangerous, right? Because we're essentially handing over what God has called us to bear in bearing His image to this machine or to this technology, right? And so that can be anything when it comes to parenting, when it comes to like you were saying, Luke's relationships. I was watching, because I watch and I try to follow where things are heading. I like to be in the loop with that, and I came across this this clip where this guy was like, we use it like anytime my wife and I get into an argument, we pull out ChatGPT and we give our arguments, and whatever ChatGPT kind of helps mediate.
The arbitrator?
Yeah, helps mediate between us in this argument. Or whenever I don't know how to parent like I'm in a situation where I don't fully know what I should do in parenting my child. Like, I have a responsibility to parent my child. That's not going to be given to anyone. Right. And we seek wisdom from other people. I go to you guys all the time and say, hey, what have you done? Because you've got older kids and you've been through some of that. But then I go and I parent my kids. And when I'm in an argument with my wife, like, I work it out with my wife. Or if I'm gonna have somebody who's gonna mediate, it's not gonna be ChatGPT, right? And so we're good mediators. Exactly. So we want to be careful. That these valuable responsibilities that God has given to us and entrusted to us as humans and as Christians never gets handed off to a tool to accomplish on our behalf.
Amen to that. Amen. Well, guys, any last thoughts, closing thoughts on the topics of technology and AI that you want to share, or quotes from books, anything that you can think of before we bring it home?
I mean, I just spoke, but I can speak again. One of the things that I think is important is, as even among us four, I'm probably the most, I wouldn't say, probably say optimistic, but also the most open to using artificial intelligence and kind of experimenting with how it can be used as a tool. We've kind of laughed and alluded to it. There's others on our panel.
Like we're divided there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, I was going to say it's almost in order. Maybe these.
I think Derek and Luke
flipped a little bit. It's probably
me, then Drew.
We may or may not have an artificially intelligence generated intro song for the podcast. Maybe Matt's going to throw something like that out there with one of his little fancy apps that he uses.
Yeah. So I'm optimistic, and I think a little bit more open than some of you guys to use it as a tool, and some of you are a little bit more cautious. What I want to end with, though, is I am helped by Derek, who is a lot more on the cautious side, right? And so,
and vice versa.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to allude to.
Absolutely, before. I am helped by that because we need each other as we think wisely about this. I need Derek to say, have you thought about this? Right before we started the podcast, we were talking about some of these things, and Derek, mentioned to me, he's like, one of the things that I think makes me cautious is I don't want to get hooked on it, and then later on down the road realize this was not good, because there's still a lot of things that we don't know how it's gonna. I don't want to give myself over to be to be like already almost addicted to this or dependent upon it or whatever, just very familiar and comfortable with it. And then it's slowly getting like, oh, this might not be wise anymore with the direction it's heading. But by that point, I'm already so comfortable with it. It's almost like desensitized to the
quick example. And Brent mentioned it about his, admittingly his screen usage or his usage on the phone.
Yeah.
Right. If you'd have told me, and admittingly mine can be there as well. Right.
Yeah.
Whatever hours it is per week. But if you'd have told me 10 or 15 years ago, hey, you're going to be on a phone for that amount of time, I'd have said you're crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
Who am I talking to?
But here we are. Here we are 15 years later, and I go, oh yeah, I do that. And so that's my caution is, okay, if I run to the machine, run to the machine, 15 years, am I going to look back and go, oh, what if you'd have told me that here's where I would be 15 years later?
Yeah. And so even in the midst of, trying to see the ways that it works and can be helpful, I'm helped by somebody who says, well, think about this, right? And so that's kind of my closing thought is we need to not just fall in with all the crowd who hates it and wants nothing to do with it and just stick in that crowd without considering and thinking through others who I genuinely think I'm trying to think wisely. I'm trying to be cautious. There have been things that it's like, oh, I don't think I'm going to use it like that anymore because I don't think that's good. And so there needs to be conversation. We sharpen one another, right? And so be sharpened by one another.
Right. Yeah.
So I have a couple things that I'll try to fit in quickly, but the first one is, there's a quote from the back of the book. I'm not going to read it, but in this appendix, he talks about, this is Stephen Driscoll from the Made in Our Image book that we went through as pastors.
Not Mark Driscoll,
Not Mark.
which I accidentally shouted out at the conference.
That's right. You can't say his name. It's like a swear word. No, but Stephen Driscoll, God, artificial intelligence, and you. And in this appendix, he talks about technology and our changing society. And he likens AI today with like the ramifications that it will have on our culture and our society as kind of the effects of what happened during the Industrial Revolution back in the day. And so he's kind of predicting, and so far with what we've seen, like, we see a lot of this, and there was a lot of really real good that came from the Industrial Revolution, but some of it wreaked havoc on the family, right? Because it separated families. Moms went into the workforce instead of working in the home and doing all the things, and so there's a lot of good that came with it, but it came at a cost. And so he's kind of saying, get ready for it, because that's kind of one of the things that we have to be vigilant about as Christians, as pastors, as people who are seeking to protect and provide and shepherd, that we're not giving way to something that isn't godly, that isn't honoring the Lord, that isn't biblical. And so that's the kind of the first thing I would just throw out there as a closing thought is, let's just stay vigilant with it. Let's keep monitoring it. We can use it, like we said, and there's other uses that we didn't get into that I'm sure are fine. Be careful with it. Don't put personal information on it. There's just so much that could be said about this, that I think this hopefully was helpful for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have any closing thoughts before we bring it home? All right. Well, thank you to all the people who watched and listened to the podcast today. We're super excited to talk about this topic. And, ultimately we want people to, the reason we have this podcast is we want people to treasure Christ above all. We want people to treasure Christ more. And how we use AI and how we use technology, is it increasing your ability to treasure Christ, or is it taking away from it, right? That's really what we want to nail home. And so thank you again for listening. We do look forward to your feedback. Email us at treasurecast@woodridge.com, or .cc. I don't know where that came from. I don't think I've ever said .com, but woodridge.cc. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Take care.
In fun, Pastor Matt Jantz and I decided to use some generative AI, like we talked about in the show, to write a song about the TreasureCast, inspired by our name for the show and the mission of proclaiming Christ above all. Now, you can argue that this song is not real because generative AI created it, and we should have used real musicians to write, play, and record it, which that's fine. But in the spirit of this episode, we thought it would be fun to include this song for your enjoyment. Thank you for listening to this episode of the TreasureCast. The TreasureCast aims to support the church as we glorify God by proclaiming the gospel, making disciples, and treasuring Christ above all. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with any friends or family you think would enjoy it, and follow the show on your preferred podcast platform. If you would like more information about our ministry, please visit woodridge.cc. Go and treasure Christ above all today.